so the goals of the approach, or of today's talk at least, are to help you understand what I consider to be two essential styles for mentoring relationships. Now, they're born out of program-based mentoring relationships, but as you will see, I think the framework has tremendous relevance for those folks who work with journey persons in apprenticeships, coaches, even tutors and teachers, but I'll let you be the judge. And what we're going to try and do is define these two terms, instrumental style and developmental style, in terms of these three other terms. That's called the opposite of parsimony, when you take two terms and you actually define them with three other terms. But nevertheless, we move forward, and wrong clicker, isn't this funny? Okay. If you type in mentoring program on the web, you're probably going to come up with a bunch of individual programs from around the world. And I would bet you on half of those websites, on the first page or one page within it, are listed the findings from the Big Brother Big Sister of America's community-based mentoring program findings, the study from 1995-98 by Tierney and Grossman. Students who had a mentor were less likely to do drugs, less likely to skip school, right? You know those? They're on everybody's website. I'm not going to talk about those. You know about them, and I've just told you where you can find them. But before they did that impact study, and I'm only going to digress briefly and suggest that I think this is an approach that we should use more often, which is not to evaluate the effectiveness of a program, right, until we've actually studied whether or not it's being implemented well and fully, right? A lot of times we throw money out there and we try to evaluate things that are halfway in the process of being created, and then when they don't work, we paste a broad brush and say, such and such doesn't work. We do this in the States over and over again. It drives me crazy, but I don't want to digress. But there were two studies. One of the things that they did was Morrow and Stiles, who worked for Public-Private Ventures, did observational studies of the community-based mentoring program, Big Brother Big Sister, across the agencies they were going to work in. They wanted to see, what is this thing? What does it look like? How well these programs run? And specifically, what are we evaluating? And so they really studied the matches, and they tried to figure out, how do we characterize these effective matches, right, through observation? And it was only after they really figured out what they were studying that they did their impact study. Now, it was out of this report that the term developmental emerged, and I'm going to describe that for you in just a second, and the definitions that you're going to see up here are actually in your handout. But another term emerged, and it was this notion, or this term called a prescriptive style. How many of you ever heard the term prescriptive style or prescriptive approach used with mentors? No? Thought I had one hand. Until we started this, I was certain that everybody was misguided about this term. Now I realize nobody's ever heard it. I mean, if I had known that back then, I wouldn't have cared. But I was passionate about wanting people to quit misusing the term. 3 years later, I find out they weren't using it to begin with. Sounds like another government program. U.S. government program, right. Thank you. All right, so what's essential, the developmental style, that description got used, but it was pretty simplistic. People typically thought that this is just a highly relational approach to mentoring, where the relationship is the focus. And that was it, right? But they said a lot more. I'm gonna borrow some readers to read these quotes for me. And I'm starting with you, handsome.
The whole thing?
The whole thing.
Developmental mentoring interactions, Morrow Stiles in 1995. These relationships were given the label developmental because the adult partner in the match focused on providing youth with a comfort zone in which to address a broad range of developmental tasks, such as building emotional well-being, developing social skills, or gaining straightforward exposure to a range of recreational and cultural activities.
Awesome, thank you. And the main thing I want to focus on here is this notion of addresses a broad range of developmental tasks. Broad range, not specific goals, specific outcomes, specific achievements, but broad change generally. This young lady, if you'll read the next slide once I get us to it.
Okay.
You don't read the top reference.
These relationships were given. Yeah, I was just gonna say
Wow.
same thing.
That was a trick.
Thanks.
Wow.
But increasingly, these approaches are viewed as integrated and good matches. Morrow and Stiles noted that after relatively extended and Pacific periods primarily devoted to relationship building, that is, to establish trust and partnership and enjoying activities, the majority of youth in developmental relationships began to demonstrate a pattern of independent help seeking in which they voluntarily divulge such difficulties as poor grades or family strife.
Awesome. And you know why that's a great quote? Because it says a lot. It says a couple things I want to highlight here. And in that funny Pacific, almost every time I present this, I say, it is Pacific, which means calm. I don't know why they use the word. So it's the first time I haven't commented on the word, and then someone says, what's that? I had the same question. I had that word in there, but it's real. Okay. So we've got this idea of the building the relationship. That's not new, right? And fun activities. That's not new. Two things are new, though. The main one is that once a relationship had been built, once the highly relational interactions, had been established as a pattern and sort of trust had developed, a pattern of independent help-seeking emerged in which the kids started to share with their mentor specific problems that they needed to have addressed, right? When we did the SMILE study, one of the things that was neat is that we looked at the interactions that occurred. And because the Communities in Schools program encourages their staff to bring in folks from the community, they get credit for doing that, right? But they only get credit when the mentor, in this case, completes a log that demonstrates that they've been there. They have to describe what they did. So I adapted the log to be kind of consistent with what the field says mentoring relationships are about and what they should do. Actually, we went back and looked at 3 years of prior notes about what all the mentors had done and turned those into categories in addition to what the literature had said. So every time a mentor came in, they completed this checklist. I'll show you the activities in a little while. The activities that are actually on the checklist are also in your handout where you see some circles. Yeah, circles. You see on the left side, those are some of the activities that they noted the degree to which they did these every time they met and how much time they spent doing those. So being sort of biased by this notion of a developmental style, I assumed that the relationships that were really heavily relational were going to be the strongest, and the ones that were, at that point I was thinking prescriptive, because that's all I knew, right, were going to be bad. Or, actually I didn't think they were going to be bad, I just thought they weren't going to be useful. But it turns out, when we looked at the outcomes at the end of the first year, and we correlated those with what activities the mentors reported doing, we actually found positive gains occurred when the relationship was the focus, when the relational activities, talk about family, friends, listening and learning, playing games, when those things happened, the kids got better. When the focus was goal-directed, the kids got worse, on average. And that kind of shocked me a little bit, because I didn't expect them to really get worse. I just thought they wouldn't get any better. So at the end of the year, actually the following school year, we went to go interview these kids. We thought, well, let's get some meat on these bones and find out what's happening out there. I expected just to get information that would confirm what we found the prior year. But that isn't what I heard. When we went back to talk to matches, note these are matches that have now gone 2 years. There's kids who are still in the program. When we asked, and I had 4 graduate students go ask the kids, the littles, the mentees, ask them, how do you know your mentor cares about you? Right? And questions like that. So I didn't ask them about activities or anything. I was supposed to keep this open-ended. They mentioned, they listened to me, they talked to me, but they also said things like, they help me with my work. Or, I know my mentor cares about me because she's willing to not have fun and to help me with my work. We heard this more often than I was able to pretend I wasn't hearing, right? But it didn't fit in. It didn't make sense to me, really. And there was even one kid who said something like, I really don't understand it. I think she cares about me, but she knows I'm struggling with my work at school, and she won't help me with it. And I thought, wow, this is really blowing my mind. And that's when I really started getting interested in what's happening in the match. And what is this? Because at this point, we're looking and we're seeing that those goal-directed activities, talking about the future, talking about school, those things actually